Hello and welcome to my video. My name is Tyler Rickson. I'm a CPA based out of Seattle, Washington. I run my own business, Jerry Hill Partners, where I help other entrepreneurs who want to create a holistic tax, accounting, and finance solution for both their personal life and their business to really help them live the life of their dreams. I wanted to create this video today because I put together this template for one of my wedding photography clients and found that it was super helpful for her. And she ended up saving a ton of money in taxes because the rules surrounding sourcing for photography in Washington state are pretty weird. So I thought, why not get out of the consumer role? I love watching YouTube videos. I've learned so much from so many smart people who are willing to share their time. And I thought, why not create something that, other entrepreneurs, other photographers can use, or other people who run their own tax and accounting business. This is an opportunity for you to learn a little bit more and just create a better service line for some of your clients, especially if you're new in the industry. So yeah, plus I'm also getting married next year, and I thought this would build up some good karma if I could help out some of the photographers of the world. So thank you. You know who you are. So to jump into this template, you can download it in the description for free, but it's kind of just a quick and dirty template. You could definitely make it a lot better, but I just tried to make it as easy as possible for someone who might not love jumping around in Google Sheets as much. But for me, it was pretty helpful. So you start off with putting in your total sales for the year. Now, this would look different, right? If you're not a yearly filer in Washington state, maybe you're someone who makes a ton of money and you have to file quarterly or monthly. But for purposes of this example, we're just going to focus on someone who has to do this once a year. So you want to start by determining what your gross receipts or your gross sales are for the year. And the best way to do that is to probably just gather up all your invoices or look at your accounting software if you have one. If you're using some sort of accounting ledger, utilize that. One thing I noticed, though, where a lot of people go wrong is that they'll drop in the total amount that they got paid from their clients in here in their total sales. But the reality is, you don't want to put in any amount that you collected for sales tax because that's actually not income for you. That's just money that you're grabbing from your client and then holding and then remitting over to the state. So, if you got paid $120,000 from all your clients for the year, but only 100 of that was actual sales, like gross revenue for you, you want to make sure you drop that amount in here. And you can see I put in like a fake invoice that I created from ChatGPT that would kind of give you an idea. So you'd be using the subtotal and not the total due here. I will say, though, there's an issue with this particular fake invoice from ChatGPT that I want to walk through at the end of this video to kind of explain where AI can go wrong and how it's always good to double check things and research your position. So to jump back into the calculator, once you drop in your total sales, then you'll go through and you'll kind of break out what kinds of sales there were. Now, I will say for most people who are running a wedding photography business, probably most of the time those sales are going to fall under retailing sales. At times, they will be potentially like a royalty sale or a service sale or a wholesale, if you're selling to another business for certain things. But for most of the time, you're probably going to be in the retailing sales section. Again, you always want to double check if you are feeling energized and you have a good amount of chi for the day. You can always jump in and read this Washington photography tax guide that Washington put out. It's actually really helpful. And I'd encourage all the accountants out there to read this. Maybe not the lightest reading. I definitely know I was a little tired after reading it, but it's super interesting and I actually learned a lot. So I'd highly encourage everyone to peek in there. After you break out your sales, you'll go down here and list out the location of the sales. And this is another area where I see a lot of people go wrong. You would think, right, that where the location of the wedding took place is where that sale should be apportioned, but that's not actually what Washington Department of Revenue says. They say that you need to source that sale to where the customer actually receives the photo. So let's say someone who lives in Portland came over to Seattle for a wedding, or maybe Port Angeles, my hometown. And you shot the wedding for them. It was a great event. Everyone's happy. A couple months later, you send them back the pictures, and it turns out that they have moved. And instead of living in Portland, now they live in Vegas. Well, really, what you're supposed to do is source that sale to wherever they received the photos digitally. They treat digital photos the same as like hard copies for this purpose. Again, you can jump into that photography tax guide for more info. But the big idea here is that wherever they open it is where you should source the sale. Now, I will say sometimes it's unrealistic to know. Like, what if you send them, the teaser photo and they're in Hawaii on a honeymoon? You might not know that. So most of the time, people will go off of the invoice of where the customer lives that they signed. Um, if you're not sure or have more questions on that, I know it's pretty dense. You can drop a question in the chat, and I'm happy to get back to you. So yeah, so you can see here they split out the sales, or I split out the sales for this fake client. And you'll notice here that I put in a little check, and all this is saying is that you're missing 4,000. So let's say, oh, actually, no, I had 20,000 in sales for Las Vegas. Viva Las Vegas. So you want to update that and get it fixed there. So that way you can kind of be on track. So then the nice thing is that instead of including all those sales in Washington for the year, you actually only need to include the ones where the customer received the photo in Washington state. So here, what I did was I made sure to put in the non-Washington sales. I just went through and like manually put those together. And you can have that as a deduction in your Washington DOR filing for your excise taxes. And that would go under the classification of interstate and foreign sales deduction. So that's another place where I've seen people go wrong, is that they're including all the sales when they could be deducting out ones where they're outside of Washington. So yeah, you could go through here and update this template so that it looks exactly like how it'll look in your Washington DOR account. I didn't do that for this purpose, but you could totally make it whatever works best for you. One thing I do want to point out, though, is that if you're someone who relies on AI tools like ChatGPT or Perplexity for a lot of the services, you got to really watch out, especially if you're a business owner and you go in here and you're like, hey, can you help me out? I'll show you where it went wrong. So I asked it, could you create a fake invoice for wedding photography that is for a wedding in Seattle, but the client lives in Port Angeles, Washington? And it was like, sure, no problem. So you can see here, bill to Port Angeles, event location. Don't even know if there's a real spot in Seattle. And it put the sales tax as the Seattle rate, which we know that's not the case. It should have been Port Angeles here, which is where they probably opened up the photo. And so I asked it, are you sure that's correct for a photographer? Can you double check the sourcing? And it was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. We goofed up on that one. Should have been Port Angeles. And so this just highlights, the need to really dive deep into research. So if you are a photographer, you might not have the time. So double check with your accountant, ask these things. But if you are an accountant and you're doing this type of work for your clients, really make sure you have a solid foundation in research. I did a Masters of Tax program that was a whole year long, and I still feel like I just know this much of that there is to know about tax. So I would highly encourage you to spend some time, jump around in some of these resources I put in here and get to understand, because even though this is how you do it for photography, it looks completely different if you're a software company or you're an electrician or a plumber or you sell charcuterie boards. So if you have any questions, like I said, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll probably put my email in here too, but yeah, I hope to make more of these videos so that someone can get some benefit out of it. All right. Have a great rest of your day, and thanks. Bye.